put together, well, specifically for the Real World, to live in a house and see what happens, coming off of also all the buzz that was like a Melrose Place, and when MTV itself came to create something like the Real World. Originally, the idea was to have a version of the Melrose Place, a very much a scripted show, etc. And saving money, I suppose, or just trying a new genre, the docu style, gave way to the Real World. I want to eventually do another episode here on Randomly with Ronnie Jr., which I know you are liking, and subscribing, where I break down some of the cast members that are really wonderful. One of the episodes I had done previously was, where's Coral Smith? And we want to see more of her. She's a doula now. She was one of the biggest reality TV stars of her time. And it always makes me think like where she would be if she was having her ascension in the genre of reality TV when everything was so monetizable. You know what I mean? In my opinion, Coral was somebody that was just so fantastic regardless. And please go check out that episode. It's right here on the channel. That no matter where Coral goes, I feel like she's always going to land exactly where she needs to be. But to say that I miss seeing a Coral Smith from the Real World, that would be the Back to New York season. It's like an understatement. She was really good at this. She was really compelling. Like her or not, she was saying, if she said the right thing or not, she was compelling. What was the line she said? I don't wrestle, I beat bees up. I think that was to Julie, right? And Melissa from Real World New Orleans didn't like her as well. Anyways, and another thing that we could talk about too is the challenge a bigger show than the Real World? That is a big, big, difficult question because the challenge has done so well and stood on its own. But I think the core of the genre was the wonderful cast members originally on the Real World. And it also begs the question too, will the Real World ever do a homecoming? They did 3 homecomings on the Paramount Plus, which was the New York season, the Venice season, the one with Tammy Roman, John Brennan. I did an interview with John Brennan also on my channel here, so go check that out. And the New Orleans season, which I believe was season number 9. That was Danny, that was Melissa, that was well, come on, be my baby tonight. I believe he was going by the name Tokyo at the time. That was David. Really wonderful season. Jamie, the interesting Julie, so on and so forth. So yeah, it makes me ask 2 questions. Will we ever get a Real World homecoming to come back? Do you like the Challenge All-Stars, which is the older version of the Challenge, which has a lot more of the Real World cast members versus the flagship MTV show, which is much more influencers or social media people? I mean, as it is, as we're going to talk about this, it's like we're all over the place in terms of the universe that is Challenge All-Stars, Real World, Road Rules, etc. It's actually funny. The fandom is really big with this genre, this particular angle, but sometimes you see like Bachelor has Bachelor Nation, and I feel like in some ways the Real World, the Challenge, Road Rules, the All-Stars, and the homecomings is just as big. Anyways, so let's go back and reminisce of what it was like, of how we as viewers were enjoying this TV show called The Real World all those years ago, and let's talk about some of the highlights. I don't want to call anything the best, but The Real World New York, the original season, and why it was so wonderful.
The 1992 docuseries premiered in May with a 13-series run co-created by Jonathan Murray and the late Mary Ellis Boonham. The iconic cast included Norman the artist, musicians Becky and Andre, Kevin the writer, Heather the rapper, Eric the model, and Julie, who was the fish out of water from Alabama, who just moved to New York City to pursue a career in dance. The Real World New York's initial season covered a variety of topics, including career aspiration, the state of politics for the MTV generation, New York City poverty, drug abuse, nightlife, liberation, education, activism, and more. The series was greeted with a variety of cameos, including Isaiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, and Bill Laimbeer, radio host Matt Pinfield, politician Jerry Brown, nightlife artists Michael Allig and Amanda Lepore, TV host Charles Perez, and most notably, Heather B's ultimate crush, basketball player Larry Johnson.
I always have a soft spot in my heart for the Back to New York season, Coral, Mike, The Miz, essentially a guy from Ohio, and he'd have that little fake wrestling belt at the end of the season. Like he kind of branded that throughout the season. Who would have knew that when he did the Real World Back to New York, which I also like that it was a fall season. It wasn't a summer season. I'm sorry, not fall. It was a winter season. I don't know why I like that, but it's always kind of interesting to see the East Coast shows that do a winter season versus like a hot summer season. I don't know. I don't know why, but it's interesting to me. But Mike, who would have knew that Mike and some of the vulnerabilities, and he sort of stepped in it a couple times. But those bumps and bruises, that who would have knew that he would succeed the way he has? I mean, he essentially has not been off of television in his own shows for that entire duration. So that's the early 2000s. I don't know, by watching that show that season, I would have thought Mike the Miz would have had the longevity that he does. That season, I think maybe Nicole, she seemed like she wasn't around enough. I think we needed more of Nicole. But I think every other cast member was fun. Lori gave you like, kind of like I believe she was one of the online, this is when online became a thing. She was one of the online winners or something of that nature. And she was fun. And she wanted to be like the next Nicole Scherzinger or something like that. Although I don't know if Nicole Scherzinger was a thing just yet. But the time, the era. She dressed in the garb of like very like Coyote Ugly, the movie, remember? In fact, Nicole Scherzinger, side note, she started essentially, on Pop Stars, another reality show about making the band, so to speak, called Pop Stars with Eden's Crush. Remember Yvette Sosa? Was it Rosanna? It was a bunch of people. It was a really good show. But Lori, to me, occupied that level. Like she was like that girl. She was like, I want to go into music. I want to have like a cool little music career. She didn't have a ton of ambition. But what made her fun to watch is you always like it when like a real pretty girl is like a little bit vulnerable or kind of not very good at trying to date. And I believe she really struggled with dating Kevin. And so I think that was like fun to watch. She was harmless, you know what I mean? She probably could have given a little bit more, but she was also really fun to watch. She was harmless. Sometimes a pretty girl like her, like Lori, they could have somewhat of an attitude, I guess, potentially. She actually was the opposite. She was a little bit more embarrassed and nervous and goofy. There was also Rachel. Rachel was the like fish out of water, new to New York. That was kind of her thing. And of course, Coral. Coral really was the show. She made the show. Coral made the show. I liked where that house was. There was the three different Real Housewives of... There was the three different real world New York houses. Specifically, there's the one in Soho, which was the first one, like Heather B, Norm, Eric Nies, and everybody. The second one was more, I think, tucked deeper into the West Village, okay? So I think just, if it was me, like I would love to live in that house. Like I thought that was a good location. The last Real World New York was in Brooklyn. Great idea, but I believe I had heard the rumblings that the Brooklyn season was actually going to be in downtown Brooklyn. I think that would have been wonderful. I think, like a Cobble Hill would have been wonderful, et cetera, et cetera. Carroll Gardens would have been wonderful, but I think in the last minute, they took it to Red Hook. Now, I've walked by that house in Red Hook, and it does look wonderful. I mean, it's not a house anymore. I think there's like a winery or something like that. But one of the things I think that's always challenging, I thought this in the San Diego season, is when you have a house, and this is probably a production thing, when you have a house that is so kind of further out and harder to get to, I think you lose sort of the excitement. A lot of the time with the Real World, it's these 25-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds, they're working on their career, they're hitting the town, but they're also romancing this one and that one. And something about like having the house so far away, to me, like slows the energy down. Like I said, San Diego, the second San Diego, I think they were beautiful home on the cliff overlooking the water, but it was way, way, way away. Whereas the first San Diego season, that's the one with Brad, Robin, Randy, Frankie, the late Frankie, Cameron, who went on to do Bravo TV, Southern Charm. That one was more in the mix, closer to, maybe like the, Gas Lamp District, et cetera, et cetera. So that one made a lot more sense in terms of that. Although I think that house created some also things that had to be edited out of the show in a very difficult way, if you get what I'm saying. Just do your research on that. Yeah, I don't think everything went great, but it was a good season. That San Diego season was really good. Anyways, my point being, the house location matters. So as we talk about Real World back to New York, I like that they were in the West Village. The Soho House, also amazing. But I liked the West Village one. I think that was like a cool location. And like I said, the third New York, Red Hook, it was spacious, but it was really kind of pushing them further away, and you're just kind of out of the mix, which I don't really. I think there could have been other places in Brooklyn they could have done for that third season of the Real World New York. As we're talking about the Real World back to New York, like I said, Coral, Mike, Kevin, Rachel, Lori, Nicole, and Malik. Was that all of them? Yeah. What I also liked about that particular season is they were working within the music industry. So I liked that their job, I think they went up to like a radio station. You know me, I've always worked in radio. So they were working at a radio station. So I think the show at that point had not jumped the shark. It hadn't gotten to the point where where all the other like bells and whistles, remember like the Real World San Francisco, not the first one was really good, but the Real World San Francisco where they would like the explosions where the X's came in. There was one, Corey, Corey from The Challenge. He was on that. Who was the girl? She left the first day or something like that, but she ended up winning. Mitchell's her last name. She ended up winning a bunch on the challenge. Ashley? Yeah, I think it's Ashley. That was like when the show jumped the shark. They started having all these gimmicks, and so what I'm saying, sorry, I'm going back and forth to this Real World back to New York. It was at the time where there wasn't no jumping the shark. There was no gimmicks. It was just like what these people were doing, how they were living their lives, and then they had a cool job to kind of go with that. And I think that one was one that I like. Real World Back to New York is a show that I would like to have been on. I auditioned and made it further in the rounds to the Philadelphia season. But the New York one was I was maybe a little too young to do it, or younger. But the Philly one I really would have wanted to get on. And the Philly one was like something that kind of like wasn't the greatest at the time. It kind of had a lull. But Philly actually, in my opinion, as a rewatch, it's not bad. Like it's a decent season. What is to me the most overrated is the Real World Austin. The way that they pumped Real World Austin was like it was the greatest thing. And I'm just sorry. The Melinda and Danny was just such a waste of time. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it was a waste of time. I'm glad they were in love at the time. But the time spent on like how wonderful this is. It was a snooze fest. The house was ugly as can be. Remember those pastel colors of that house? But the DC season, I definitely liked. I don't know, that we've talked enough. So that asks the question, which Real World season was your favorite and why? Which one is timeless, meaning you could go back now and you could watch it and enjoy it just like when it aired? Was there a season that you overlooked and then you went back and you're like, this ain't so bad? Which I said London. London, season 4, coming off San Francisco, it was like, of the time, it was like London was a little boring, we thought. No, I watch it now. I'm a 40-year-old, in my 40s. I'm like, oh, I love the London season, Anyways, the thing about Real World, it is storytelling. Not every season, but a lot of the show is storytelling, and it's a wonderful way. It is still TV, but it is a wonderful way to see different people and how you can relate to them. You know what I mean? That is one thing that they have always done on that show, is they've always sort of, I wouldn't say push the envelope, but they always went there. They always went there with different bits of storytelling. So I definitely think Real World in the conversation of reality TV, it is a different thing. I'm bummed that the end seasons just fell so flat, but I don't think that type of programming is bad. So I look forward to another lightning in a bottle, Real World type show. Who knows? Maybe I'll create it. Anyways, before we wrap up, I'm glad you checked out this episode here. If you want to support, here is a way that you could do it.
For more randomness, hit the Patreon at patreon.com/randomlyronniejr. Did you remember to like, comment, and subscribe? Oh, come on, stop being so lazy. This show has no budget, but whose fault is that if you don't like, comment, or subscribe?
All right, so that wraps it up. We will go in detail next time on like who is your favorite cast member from these shows. Again, I said I loved Coral, I loved Kara, I liked Mike from DC. Of course, Pedro in San Francisco was such a moment. You know what I mean? So, who is your favorite cast member will be the next thing we talk about. All right, till the next one, we'll talk to you.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.